Thank you for taking the time to watch this safeguarding training, which has been designed for volunteers who have applied to be a host at a chatter and natter table. My name is Jenny Bimpson, and I'm the Volunteers Manager and also the designated safeguarding lead for the Chatty Cafe scheme. I report to our Board of Directors with any serious concerns. The presentation outline. In this session, we will cover what safeguarding adults actually means, the key principles of safeguarding, the different types of abuse, how to respond to a safeguarding concern when sat at a chatter and natter table, how to signpost people to other services to help them, and the boundaries that we need to keep within. What does safeguarding adults mean? Some of the people who come to sit at your table may be considered a vulnerable adult, and vulnerable adults are considered more at risk of abuse. Obviously, in your role as a host, you will not know who will come to sit at the table, as they are open to any member of the public. The reason we give this safeguarding training is to look at worst case scenarios to ensure you have the tools to cope should you ever need them. A vulnerable adult, or also known as an adult at risk, is anyone with a long-term physical health condition, a mental health condition, an addiction, or anyone who needs care or support. Everyone is entitled to be safe, and we are going to discuss how you can help by signposting someone to a specialist service if needed. The aims of safeguarding adults. The aims are to prevent harm and reduce the risk of abuse or neglect to adults with care and support needs. Stop abuse or neglect wherever possible. To make safeguarding personal. This means to help adults in a way that supports them in making choices and having control about how they want to live. An example could be someone who doesn't eat healthy or lives in a home not to your standard of hygiene. This doesn't mean they cannot live like that, as it is their choice. And this means supporting people at risk to improve or resolve their circumstances. The definition of an adult at risk is someone who is elderly and frail, or someone who has a mental illness, including dementia, or someone who has a physical or sensory disability, someone who has a learning disability, someone who has a severe physical illness, someone who has a history of substance misuse, or someone who is homeless. There are 6 key principles of safeguarding. Number 1, empowerment. This is to ensure people are supported and encouraged to make their own decisions and informed consent. Number 2, prevention. It is always better to take action before harm occurs. Always tell a person to raise any concerns with the appropriate authorities, i.e. the police, GP or emergency services, as soon as possible. Number 3, proportionality. Always look to take the least intrusive response appropriate to the risk presented. As a service, we must respect the person, think about what is best for them, and only get involved as much as needed. Number 4, protection. Protection is all about ensuring we all know how to report a concern within our organisation if needed. 5, partnership. Everyone has a part to play in preventing, detecting and reporting abuse. Number 6, accountability. Safeguarding is everybody's business. We are accountable, and it is important as a volunteer you know what to listen out for and what to do with that information. Different types of abuse. There are many types of abuse, including financial and psychological, as well as the more commonly known physical, emotional, and sexual. You should not be taking the contact information of anyone who sits at your table. So if you're chatting to someone and they raise a concern, you should be encouraging them to report it themselves. We have to remember They have got themselves to the venue and therefore are considered able to contact the appropriate service for help. An example of financial abuse could be if someone tells you that their friend has taken over control of their bank account and benefits to help them, but now they are struggling for money. You could advise this person to report this to the police. An example of emotional abuse and modern slavery could be if a person at the table has a learning disability and say someone has moved in with them and now makes them cook and clean. Again, you could advise them to tell the police or their social worker if they have one. An example of physical abuse could be a lady who lives alone in a ground floor flat and youths are persistently knocking on her door, smashing windows, and making threats to her life. You could advise her to tell the police. Official reports show that compared to other age groups, people aged 85 and over are much more likely to be the subject of a safeguarding inquiry. This highlights that older people can be more vulnerable to abuse and neglect. Here is a list of all the different types of abuse to be aware of. I have noted here that it lists abuse for adults and children, but please do note that our services are only for people aged over 18. How to respond to a safeguarding concern when sitting at a chatter and natter table. When you have completed your volunteer training, we will send you in the post a Chatty Cafe Scheme name lanyard. This is bright yellow and will have your first name written on one side and a list of crisis support services on the back. It is really important that you always wear your Chatty Cafe lanyard when sitting at the table, as this ensures you always have the list of crisis support helplines to give out if needed. If someone tells you something that causes you concern, i.e. they are feeling suicidal, how you react is very important, as this person may be telling you something they've never told anyone before. Listen carefully and take care not to blame them. Do not panic or overreact. What to do if you are told a person is being subjected to abuse. Listening is really important. Don't interrupt, don't be judgmental, and remain calm. Then consider, is it an emergency and is someone else in immediate danger? If so, advise the person to call 999 themselves. An example could be if someone tells you that they are being sexually abused and so is their neighbour. This would be a matter for the police. It is not your responsibility to call 999, but you can advise them to call themselves. It is not your role to investigate or ask questions, but you could advise them who to report it to, i.e. the emergency services or crisis support services on the back of your lanyard. Crisis helplines. These can also be found on page 16 of the Chatty Volunteer Handbook, which is on our website on the About Us page, under Policies and Procedures. They can also be found on the back of your lanyard name card. The Samaritans are a 24-hour crisis support helpline, including suicide prevention services, mental health support, and emotional assistance. SANE offers emotional support and information for anyone affected by mental health problems. Victim Support provides emotional and practical support for people affected by crime and traumatic events. The British Red Cross provides emergency and crisis support services, community support services, including services for the elderly, the homeless, and those at risk of homelessness, and mental health services. Respect Men's Advice Line, a helpline for male victims of domestic abuse. Dementia UK, a helpline to speak to dementia specialists. Here are some examples of possible concerns that you may come across at the chatter and natter table. Lee, age 71, is a frequent participant at the chatter and natter table. He's friendly and seems to enjoy visiting the table for a bit of interaction. Lee speaks to the Chatty Cafe Scheme volunteer each week. At one of the sessions, Lee seems down and explains that his neighbour is aggressive and recently physically attacked Lee. This is a criminal matter and the Chatty Cafe Scheme volunteer could suggest Lee reports this matter to the police. Example 2. Mary, aged 60, joins our local chatter and natter table. Mary seems distressed and explains that she suffers from chronic mental health problems and is feeling suicidal. The Chatty Cafe volunteer could suggest Mary contacts a crisis support group such as the Samaritans and could suggest going to A&E if Mary needs to seek immediate help. Always pass any of the helplines onto the person you're speaking to if needed. Boundaries. It's very important to know the boundaries you must keep within as a volunteer. Recognise your personal boundaries, so setting and sticking to the allocated time at the table. Remembering to not overshare your experiences. You can have empathy for someone's situation. For example, someone may have recently experienced a bereavement and you have too in the past. It's fine to discuss this with them, but don't go into too much detail about your own life and situation. Also, please remember, do not disclose anything the person tells you to a third person. Do avoid getting into situations that could be misunderstood. An example of this could be saying in conversation how lovely it would be to meet up outside of the group, and someone taking this as a positive sign you may do in the future. Or someone may be going through a hard time financially, and you say you would love to be able to help them out. They may interpret this as you can give them some money. Also, do not offer to buy anyone at the table a drink. Often if you get up and order your own, everyone else will follow. Do think before you say yes to a request for help. We cannot fix people's problems, even though it is a basic instinct to want to. You can listen to them. You can signpost them to help, the Samaritans, their GP, or the emergency services. But you cannot always have the answer to their problems, and that is perfectly okay. Do not agree to give a lift to anyone to or from the venue. An example of this could be an elderly lady has got 2 buses to the venue and the weather is awful. You know you have to drive past her house to get home, and although it would be very easy to offer a lift, you must not do so under any circumstances. Don't give out your telephone number or home address. It is okay to talk about yourself, but just ensure you don't share any details like your surname or where you work. And don't give out any social media information. Do not follow or add anyone at the table to any of your personal social media accounts. Don't take someone you have met at the table to your home. This should never happen under any circumstances. Even if the venue has to close suddenly just before a session, do not invite people to your home instead. Never agree to meet someone away from the table session or promise to in the future. All of the Chatty Cafe training and safeguarding that you are attending is for chatter and natter tables only in public venues. Don't become emotionally over-involved. If you feel stressed or burdened by a conversation at the table, call the Chatty Cafe to talk it through afterwards. Do not feel you have to fix their problems and be reassured that just by listening you will probably have helped. Support. Sometimes talking through a difficult conversation can help give perspective, and you're encouraged to always contact the Chatty Cafe team to discuss a concern or debrief after a hard conversation. Maybe someone at the table has poor mental health and has offloaded their problems onto you for the duration of the session, and you're feeling helpless. Always remember, we do not always have the answer. We are simply there to listen and chat and signpost if needed to services like the Samaritans or the Citizens Advice Bureau. The well-being of volunteers is very important to us. We recognise that adult safeguarding can be tough and we are here to support you. Our safeguarding policy is available to read in full on our website under the About Us page in Policies and Procedures. And finally, please remember, a simple conversation can make a big difference to someone who spends most of their time alone. Thank you for contributing your time to this cause. Enjoy the interactions, stories, and new friendships you will make. Here are all our contact details, and if you need to contact Jenny with any questions following this session, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you for your time.